Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third session in American English Live Series 18. We are so excited that each of you are here with us today. My name is Kara, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Elena, who will be the moderator helping answer your questions and responding to your comments during the session. Let's begin today with these wonderful audience comments from our most recent webinar, Exploring Hope Theory and Social Emotional Learning Concepts through CELIL with Donita Grissom. Caroline from Brazil said, the session was just amazing. I was able to learn a lot of activities that I can provide to my students in order to motivate and engage them. Wonderful. Greta from Egypt is saying, wonderful session that created a good relationship between CELIL and the importance of SEL in the EFL classroom. I loved Hope Theory very much as it's applicable in many situations. Thank you for sharing that. Ibrahima from Senegal shared, the webinar has been so inspiring. From now on, no student should be left behind, for there is always a way to flip the script and reverse the trend. We love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development. So please continue to share your thoughts about our webinars by offering feedback through the end of session quiz form or by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments during the next session. Throughout Series 18, we are exploring the themes of social emotional learning and integrating critical thinking in ELT. We hope you are able to use the practical ideas we share during these sessions. So here's what to expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make some comments too. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. Please share your thoughts using the comments feature or chat box throughout the session. When our session comes to a close, you will have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we will share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of the 3 multiple choice questions correctly. Once you have successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to get your badge via email within about a week. And before we begin, we want to let you know about one of our current massive open online courses, Fostering Student Motivation and Engagement. In this free course, participants will learn key concepts and practices related to motivation and engagement, including building community, collaborative learning, differentiated instruction, and much more. Registration is now open, and you can use the link being shared by the moderator to learn more and enroll today. Now for today's webinar, Critical Thinking in the EFL Classroom, Engaging and Empowering Students. Students who are critical thinkers think independently, make well-informed decisions, and consider differing viewpoints, skills needed throughout their lives. Integrating critical thinking in EFL classrooms accelerates language learning, fosters intrinsic motivation, and empowers students to reach their potential. Unfortunately, these skills are often neglected in the EFL classroom. Critical thinking should be practiced and taught directly to students. This webinar will discuss the benefits and challenges of teaching critical thinking and demonstrate activities that encourage students of all levels to consider different perspectives, evaluate information, and think deeply. And we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Serena Chu-Mraz. Serena is a teacher trainer and ESL community college instructor based in Modesto, California. Her area of expertise is in teaching English for academic purposes with a focus on teaching critical thinking. She has an extensive background in developing curriculum and teaching English for hospitality and tourism, and has trained hospitality professionals in the US and Mexico. She was a US Department of State English language specialist in Brazil in 2022 and served as an English language fellow in Mexico in 2010 and 2011, teaching EFL methodology and mentoring teachers in the teacher certification program. Serena loves to travel, paint, and cook. Welcome, Serena. We are so happy to have you.
Thanks for the intro, Kara. And thank you to everyone who is joining us today from around the world. It looks like we have participants from Romania, Mexico, and Brazil. I'm excited about our topic today, critical thinking in the EFL classroom, which is the first in a series of critical thinking webinars in this teacher development series. It's one of the most important skills we can teach our students. Empower means we can help them be stronger and more confident in their own lives. I hope this webinar will give you practical tips on how to incorporate critical thinking into your classes so that you can help empower your students. Thank you to those who participated in the poll. It looks like many of you know a bit about critical thinking, and that's great. Hopefully, this webinar will give you more ideas on how to help your students think more critically. Let's take a look at the goals for today's lesson. By the end of this session, you should be able to identify how developing critical thinking skills benefits students, give examples of how to increase students' critical thinking, and incorporate at least one, hopefully more, critical thinking strategies into your classroom. And to accomplish these things, here's our agenda for today. There are 4 things on the agenda. We'll start with an overview of critical thinking. We'll move on to how to use open-ended questions. I'll show you activities to encourage critical thinking, and we'll end with a summary and a final reflection. For this first part, the overview, we will learn what critical thinking is, the benefits and challenges of critical thinking, the 8 pillars of critical thinking, and discuss if critical thinking is just for advanced students or if beginning students can do it too. First, I have a question for you to start off. What is critical thinking? Tell us what you think it is in the chat box. And if you'd like, give us an example of critical thinking.
Thank you so much, Serena, for providing such a great roadmap of where today's session on critical thinking is going. I'm seeing lots of excitement here in the chat box, so let us know, everyone, what is critical thinking? Tell us what you think that means in your own words. Wonderful. I'm seeing some folks saying giving your opinion. Great. Thinking outside of the box. That's wonderful. We have a lot of folks saying hello from Bangladesh, Tunisia. Juan is saying thinking critically means finding out facts versus opinions. Wonderful. Daniela is saying the competence of problem solving, analysis, comparison, and originality in expression of thoughts. Great response, Daniela. Thank you. Arleth is saying it is thinking outside the box to make a question and doubt and research more about the info we get. Wonderful. Hilda is saying, I think critical thinking is the ability to be competent. Freddie is adding to make a judgment using the target language. Wonderful. And I'll take one more. Eduardo is saying the ability to ask yourself whether the information you are getting is a fact or not. What do you think, Serena?
Thank you for those responses. It looks like many of you have a really good idea what critical thinking is. A simple definition of critical thinking is the ability to effectively evaluate information and form judgments. And what does that mean? In a traditional classroom, students answer questions that are either right or wrong. But in a critical thinking classroom, we don't focus so much on right or wrong, like in a multiple choice test. Instead, we encourage our students to evaluate information and express their thoughts using evidence to support their thinking. You can see how this makes learning meaningful to them. Let's look at the 8 pillars of critical thinking. If students are strong critical thinkers, they demonstrate these 8 pillars. They communicate ideas clearly. They reflect on their own actions and their own learning. They consider different perspectives and recognize that others may think differently. They demonstrate creativity. They apply what they learn to different situations so they can make connections. They can solve problems, evaluate information in a thoughtful way, and inquire and ask meaningful questions. Students who can do these 8 things have the ability to reach their potential. They are not just memorizing facts in the classroom, they are learning how to think, which in my opinion is the purpose of education. I'd like to hear from you. Which of the 8 pillars of critical thinking do your students struggle with the most?
Wonderful. Thank you, Serena. It's great to see all of the different kind of mini skills that go into making up critical thinking here in this 8-pillar model. So let us know, which of these 8 pillars of critical thinking do your students struggle with the most? So you can read through those 8 options and let us know which are the ones that are trickiest for your students. I'm seeing at least 2 responses saying evaluate information. Absolutely. Number 5, applying knowledge to new situations, application. Arlith is saying my students struggle with the first one, communicating ideas clearly, and particularly doing that in the target language. What a great point. Thank you for sharing that. Cesar is saying reflecting on your own actions and learning is a challenge. Eder is saying considering different perspectives, so number 3. Luis is saying 1 through 4, so communicating ideas clearly, reflecting on your own actions and learning, consider different perspectives, and demonstrate creativity. And Edgardo is also saying considering different perspectives, number 3. So it looks like we've got a pretty wide array of where the challenging parts of this kind of 8 pillars are for each teacher. What do you think, Serena?
I appreciate all of your responses. It does look like your students need more practice in many of these areas. So let's talk about how we can incorporate some critical thinking into your classes. Let's talk first about the benefits of helping our students think critically. Students who can think critically can think independently, make informed decisions, evaluate information, consider differing viewpoints, and they can reflect on themselves and their own learning. Critical thinking also has a positive impact on students' motivation and language acquisition. And this should be the objective of education, don't you think? Despite these many benefits, however, many teachers are hesitant to try to do too much critical thinking in their classes because there are also many challenges. Let's take a look at some challenges teachers face. One of the biggest challenges is that doing critical thinking takes time. It doesn't take much time to answer a question yes or no. But if you want students to elaborate on their answers, to debate a controversial topic, or to consider different sides of an argument, then they need time to process. Second, teachers feel like it takes away from the curriculum. Teachers face a lot of pressure because their school is giving them a curriculum to follow. So critical thinking feels like it's taking time away from the curriculum. I would argue, however, that critical thinking activities enhance the curriculum and accelerate language acquisition because students are thinking and communicating on a deeper level. Third, doing effective critical thinking takes training. It takes a lot of practice and training for teachers to be good at making critical thinking a part of their curriculum. Many teachers don't know how to help their students think more critically. And unfortunately, a lot of schools don't provide enough support in this area. Fourth, teachers of beginning levels feel that critical thinking is just for advanced learners. Teachers feel they can't teach critical thinking when their students' level of proficiency is low. However, I disagree. I'm going to show you some ways to help your beginning students think critically as well. These challenges are important to consider. Hopefully, though, you'll see that the benefits outweigh the challenges. I'd like to hear from you right now. Do you think critical thinking is for advanced students only? Please share your comments in the chat box.
Wonderful question. And I know you've shared a little of your opinion, but audience, let us know, is critical thinking for advanced students only? Why or why not? Ezra is saying that they disagree that critical thinking can be for young students. Wonderful, thanks for sharing. Alberto is also saying it should be applied at any level. Let us know why every level has critical thinking skills as appropriate. Paulette is saying it's for all levels to improve. And Eder is adding that critical thinking is essential for everyone. It seems like there's a lot of consensus of it being necessary for everyone. All levels need to develop this kind of thinking and start learning about this at low levels from Arlitt. Great. Ezra is adding critical thinking enhances students' skills when they think and evaluate different information, and that has to start early. Wonderful. Daniela is saying, no, it should be for beginners too. We can teach our students to respond using basic English. So it seems like we've got consensus here, but Serena, do you have some strategies on how to do that?
Yes, thank you everyone for sharing your thoughtful comments. It looks like many of you think that even beginning students can be taught critical thinking skills, and I agree. Now let's take a look at how you can incorporate critical thinking for beginners. Beginning students typically learn lists of occupations or jobs, such as teacher, doctor, or accountant. While it's fine to have your students learn vocabulary lists, you can push them further to think critically. Here are some questions you can ask them. Which 3 jobs are the most difficult and why? Which job would you like the most and why? Which job is most important and why do you think that? Getting beginning students to talk about the occupations helps them to engage with the vocabulary and leads to better language acquisition. To follow up with this activity, you can have your beginning students research and present their dream job. In this example, the student chooses a veterinarian as their dream job. You can ask them, why do you like this job? The student here says, I like this job because I want to help sick animals. Or, what are the responsibilities of this job? The student says, Veterinarians examine animals and keep them healthy. Your students may not know the word responsibilities, but once you teach it to them and give them some examples, they will understand. And also, what is difficult about this job? This student says, it is difficult because sometimes you cannot help an animal and sometimes it can die. In this activity, you are pushing your students to do much more than just memorize a list of jobs. They are practicing critical thinking. Now, if you're interested in doing this activity, I have provided a graphic organizer for you to use, which you can find at the American English Webinar Resource Center webpage. In this graphic organizer, students draw a picture or attach a photo of their dream job. After this activity, you can push their learning even further by asking questions that help them reflect on the activity. You can see how these correspond to the pillars of critical thinking. For example, you can ask them, what did you learn from this activity? This allows them to reflect on what they are learning, which is one of the pillars of critical thinking. You can also ask them, how is your dream job different from your classmates' dream job? This helps students consider different perspectives, which is another pillar of critical thinking. We've completed the overview of critical thinking. So now I'd like to move on to part 2, which is asking open-ended questions. This is the key to critical thinking. In this section, we'll focus on what open-ended questions are and the importance of leaving enough time for reflection. We'll talk about a strategy called think, pair, share. First, let's define what open-ended questions are. They're questions that cannot be answered with just a simple yes or no. Instead, these questions require students to elaborate or give more information and examples. Students will need to support their answers, not just say yes or no. So why ask open-ended questions? In traditional English as a foreign language classes, we see a lot of questions where the answer is either right or wrong. If we want to foster more critical thinking in our classes, we need to ask questions that require deeper thinking. When we ask open-ended questions, students think more deeply about a topic. They practice communication and listening, which accelerates language learning. It also helps students to consider other perspectives when they see that there is no one right answer, that answers are open to debate and interpretation. Here are some examples of open-ended questions so you have a better idea of what I'm saying. Why is this important? How do you know this? How is this connected to your own life? Or do you agree or disagree, and why? These questions require reflection and deeper understanding. Don't be satisfied with one-word answers like yes or no. Push your students to provide examples, to explain why this is important or how it's connected to their own lives. To better illustrate what I'm talking about, here's an example of a closed-ended question that doesn't elicit much critical thinking. What is global warming? There's nothing wrong with this question, but it doesn't push the student to do anything more than give a definition. I would like to ask Kara if she can come up with an open-ended question for this. What do you think, Kara?
This is great, Serena. I can think of a lot of open-ended questions coming from this close-ended questions. Maybe we could start by asking them how global warming is connected to their lives or how they feel about it, or combine the two into maybe something like, How does global warming impact your future? And how do you feel about it? What do you think?
That's great, Kara. This type of question requires deeper thought than memorizing a definition. It makes the lesson personal. It encourages students to think about consequences and causes and effects. If students can train their brains to think about causes and effects and how events connect to their own lives, this is an excellent use of class time. Let's have you practice this now. Here is a closed-ended question for you. Who is the main character in the story? Please turn this closed-ended question into an open-ended question.
Wonderful. So everybody in the audience, please put yourself on the spot and push yourself to come up with an open-ended version of who is the main character in the story. How can you make that question into an open-ended question? And as we're waiting for a few responses to come in, Janine did say that using open-ended questions will help develop students' higher order thinking skills and can be used with young children. So great preemptive comment about open-ended questions to the last activity. Let's see what's coming in. Josiana is saying, how do you relate yourself to the main character in the story? Great response. Alberto is saying, what would you do differently than the main character in the story? Nadia is saying, why do you like the main character of the story? Francis, what did you learn from the main character in the story? Josiane is saying, what do you have in common with the main character in the story? And Daniela is also saying, are there any similarities or differences between you and the character? Wonderful. So many great responses coming in. I'll take one more. Beatrice is saying, why do you think the main character behaved that way? So looking at an action the main character took, and then asking, why did they behave in that way? Great, Serena, back to you.
Fantastic job, everyone. I love your questions. I need to write some of these down and use them myself. I think your questions will really get your students thinking critically. Now, with open-ended questions, be sure to give students time to think and discuss. One activity I like to do in my classes with the open-ended questions is called Think, Pair, Share. It's effective because it allows for reflection time. Students can try out their ideas with a partner first, and it also builds oral communication skills. Here is how you do the Think, Pair, Share. First, give students an open-ended question and give them quiet time to think independently. They can write their thoughts down in their notebook. Second, they share their ideas with a partner. Students often get scared sharing ideas in front of the whole class, but when they're with a partner, they love sharing. This way, they are practicing what they want to say and get to consider their partner's opinions. Third, they share their ideas in a group of 4 or with the whole class. Now, students have one more opportunity to communicate their ideas, and by now, they will feel more comfortable sharing with a larger group. They are gaining more ideas because they are learning from their classmates. It's a good idea to give students a graphic organizer, such as this one, when they do Think, Pair, Share. Here, students write the open-ended question at the top. In the first square on the left, they write down their own thoughts about the question. Then, when they pair up with their partner, they write down their partner's ideas in the second square. Finally, they both decide what they want to share with the whole class or larger group, and they will write that in the third square. This graphic organizer will be available to you if you'd like to use it on the American English Webinar Resource Center page. This graphic organizer is a good example of scaffolding critical thinking. Many of our students are new to critical thinking. It's really difficult for them to suddenly give their opinions and to have discussions in class. We should provide them with critical thinking scaffolding support. Just like when we build a building, we need to put scaffolding up on the outside so that we can construct the building little by little. We also need to provide scaffolding for our students. Some ways we can provide scaffolding are to give them a graphic organizer or a worksheet to guide them, teach key vocabulary so they can understand and discuss the concepts, connect their learning with what they already know. So tap into their prior knowledge so that learning becomes more meaningful and personal, and give reflection time so they can elaborate on their answers and give examples. Let's hear from you. We just talked about the Think, Pair, Share activity. How can you adapt or use this activity for your unique learning context?
Thanks so much, Serena, for sharing that great activity and graphic organizer. There's a lot of praise and energy in the chat box about how excited teachers are to use that and how much they're liking that strategy. So let us know how you can adapt this activity for your own unique learning context, whether you teach a multi-level class, an online class, how can you adapt this activity? Ezra is saying it works with their large classroom because it allows students to share more ideas and have more talk time. Absolutely, this is a great strategy to use if you have a lot of students in one class. Wonderful. Amal is building on that and saying in the case of a multi-level class, they would use the Think, Pair, Share as a tool to peer tutor. So pairing students that are at different levels so that maybe a more advanced student can support a beginner student. Wonderful. Irene is saying I can use it in work analysis when analyzing themes and having students talk about a particular theme and then share that with the full class. Wonderful. Freddie is adding, for online classes, have students work in pairs in breakout rooms and then come back to the plenary main room to share out to the whole class. Wonderful. Great responses, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much. It sounds like you'll be able to use this Think, Pair, Share activity for your own learning context. So far, we've covered an overview of critical thinking, and you learned the importance of asking open-ended questions. Let's move on to part 3, which are some critical thinking activities you can try. I'd like to show you 2. The 4 corners activity, which is a debate, and the gallery walk. I'm excited to share with you the 4 corners and gallery walk activities. These are great critical thinking activities because they promote discussion of different perspectives. Students need to use evidence and examples to support their opinions. So they need to give reasons to back up what they are saying. Students practice communication and listening. And these are also fun activities for kinesthetic learners because students get out of their seats for these activities. Let's start with the 4 corners activity. In this activity, students debate a controversial question. First, you will prepare. Make 4 signs: strongly agree, agree, strongly disagree, and disagree. And put each of these signs up in the corners of your classroom. Second, write a controversial statement or open-ended question on the board for them to consider. This should be related to the theme of what you're studying. For example, you could write, social media is harmful, or teachers should not give homework. Step 3 is to give students time to think. Present the question to the students. Give them time to think about your question. They can write down their thoughts independently in their notebooks or on a graphic organizer. Step 4 is to commit to a corner and discuss. After you give them independent thinking time, show the students the signs in the corners and ask them to stand up and move to one of the corners. In the corners, students form groups of 2 to 3 and share their ideas. Be sure to leave time for discussion. The teacher will move from group to monitor the discussion. Step 5 is present. Call on students to present a summary of their opinions. This can be oral or written to share with the whole class. If, after hearing the ideas of their classmates, if anyone wants to change corners, they can do so, but they need to explain why. Here's a variation on the activity that's fun as well, and better for lower level students. You can make the signs in the corner A, B, C, D instead, and put the question on the board. For example, this question is for beginning students who are studying names of countries. Let's ask this question to Kara. Kara, where would you most like to go on vacation and why?
This is such a challenge, Serena, because all 4 countries sound like a great place to go. But I think I would most like to go on vacation to New Zealand. And why is because it has great natural beauty and it is the seasonal opposite of the United States. So if I went during the fall or winter, I would get to experience summertime in New Zealand, and I love the sunshine.
Thanks, Kara. I hope you can make it to New Zealand soon. So as you can see, critical thinking activities, this critical thinking activity can work for students at all levels. And as you can see, Kara had to give an example why she wanted to go to New Zealand. To help scaffold the 4 corners activity, you can use this graphic organizer where students give their opinion. Do they strongly agree, or disagree, etc., and provide 3 reasons why they chose that response. After they go to their corners and listen to the ideas of their group, they can write down 3 new reasons from their classmates. If you would like this graphic organizer, you can find it online at the American English Webinar Resource Center. Now, in addition to 4 corners, another fun activity I'd like to share with you is the gallery walk. First of all, I'd like to ask you, what do you do at an art gallery?
Thank you so much, Serena. Everyone is responding, or a lot of people are responding with their vacation ideas and other topics they can use that 4 corners activities for. But let us know, what do you do at an art gallery? Esther is saying experience art, absolutely. Daniela is saying we walk through various rooms and analyze paintings. Samet is saying we try to understand the pictures. Great. Amal is saying we look at our work and we discuss with colleagues or friends. Shamina is saying I take my time to look at every piece of art. Wonderful. And Janine, I think, is leading to what Serena's about to explain and says, place pictures on the wall and have students walk around and add their feedback. Serena, what do you think?
Thanks, everyone. Yes, being in an art gallery is interactive, and you get a chance to share your thoughts on what you see. What is a gallery walk then? This activity is similar to visiting an art gallery. Meaningful questions, photos, problem-solving situations, or quotations are placed around the room just like an art gallery. Then students will walk around the classroom looking at the gallery, and they will work together in small groups to respond to what they see. Here are the steps to doing the gallery walk. Step 1, you create 6 questions or prompts on poster paper related to the current topic and tape them around the room. In step 2, put students in groups of 3 to 5 and assign each group to a prompt. They write down their thoughts, comments, and questions on their poster. The teacher will move from group to group, monitoring the discussion and helping to clarify when students have questions. In step 3, groups will rotate to the next poster and respond to the next prompt. They can also comment on what students wrote before them. In step 4, after rotating through all of the posters, students will then go back to their original poster and see what comments and ideas were added to their original poster. In the last step, gather the class together to discuss what was learned and to draw conclusions about what they noticed and discussed. Let's try an example of what students might do in a gallery walk. I did a unit with my students on the desegregation of schools in the US. If you are familiar with US history, you might know that Black and white students did not attend the same schools together. In 1954, however, the Supreme Court ruled that this law needed to change. A group of 9 African-American students decided they would be the first ones to go to school at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. They were the first Black students to desegregate the schools, which means they would no longer go to separate schools from whites. Unfortunately, many people did not want Blacks to attend their school. This was a difficult time in American history. I put pictures from the school desegregation and civil rights movement around the classroom as a gallery walk to help students gain understanding of this time in history. I'd like you to think about this photo. This is Elizabeth Eckford, who was one of the first Black students to enter Central High School for the first time. This is a photo of Elizabeth's first day of school. Think about the following questions. What is happening in the photo? What do you notice? How is Elizabeth Eckford feeling? How does she react to the students around her? And could you do what she did? I would like to ask Kara one of the questions so you can see how photos can elicit deep thinking. Kara, how is Elizabeth Eckford feeling?
Wonderful. This is a little tricky because Elizabeth is wearing sunglasses, which makes her face a little hard to see. But from what I can tell around her, I see that the students around her are very angry. And so I would imagine that she feels afraid, or like maybe those individuals want to hurt her. And so she may feel alone or unprotected or scared because she is by herself. And these other students are very clearly making it clear they don't want her in their school.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Kara. I agree with you. Elizabeth looks very calm and brave in the photo, but inside she must have felt quite alone and scared. I would like you all to respond to this photo now. How does Elizabeth react to the students around her? And could you do what she did?
Great question, Serena. So it's your turn now, audience. How does Elizabeth react to the students around her in the image? And adding that critical thinking element, could you do what she did? So how is she acting, and could you do that same thing? So Melanie is saying Elizabeth feels nervous and tense, and Aka is saying she feels nervous. Esther is saying she's reacting with a lot of courage, and no, I couldn't react that way. Wonderful. Daniela and Samet are both saying she is ignoring the protesters, and she seems to be reacting indifferently. Arlith is adding, she tried not to be affected by the comments of other students. I don't know if I could do that. Absolutely, she's in a challenging situation. Eder is saying she's very calm and focused. And Asma is saying she feels nervous, but I think I could be that brave. Great responses, everyone.
Thank you. So here is an example of what students might write. They might say, I admire Elizabeth because she is standing up for a higher purpose. Or the crowd around her is full of hate and ugliness, but Elizabeth is confident and calm. You can see this activity engages students and connects them to this time in history. Learning becomes meaningful because they are interacting with their learning. I've just demonstrated 2 interactive critical thinking activities, 4 corners and the gallery walk. When should you use these 2 activities? You can use them before introducing new material to activate prior knowledge, after a short reading, to prepare for a test, and to generate ideas for writing. We've covered the first 3 topics so far, so let's finish off with a recap and reflection. I hope you've learned a lot from this session and are inspired to try some of these activities in your classes. Like we discussed, if you can foster critical thinking in your classes, students become more engaged and acquire language faster. They become independent thinkers, learning becomes more meaningful, and they are empowered. Here are the top things I want you to remember from this session. Don't forget, ask open-ended questions. Critical thinking is not just for advanced students. Give your students time to reflect, such as doing the think, pair, share activity. Incorporate debate, like in the 4 corners. And encourage your students to reflect deeply on concepts, such as the gallery walk. Let's take a look at the objectives for this session again, and hopefully you have learned these 3 things: how developing critical thinking skills benefits students, how to increase students' critical thinking, and how to incorporate critical thinking activities into your classes. For our final reflection, I'd like us to consider this question. What is one idea from this webinar that you would like to remember or use in your classes, and why? Please share your answers in the chat box.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Serena. As people are answering the idea from this webinar that they will remember and use in their classes, and why, we had 2 questions come in about the gallery walk activity. The first was around using the gallery walk in a large class scenario, and whether you would recommend adjusting the group size or adding more gallery stop points, but your recommendation on doing that activity with a large group. And then someone also asked about that activity with beginner learners and what scaffolding you might include in that activity for those folks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, those are really great questions. And to answer the first question, with the large class size, you can make more than 6 posters. So you can do 10 posters around the class, for example, and that would break up the group size a little bit more. So you can have smaller groups. Another a way to manage a large group is to have the students, instead of working in groups, to do this silently and independently. And sometimes I like to have my students just walk around the gallery silently, and I give them sticky notes to write down their thoughts. And they'll write down their thoughts and then just stick the sticky note onto their poster, onto the poster, and then move on to the next one. And this will be a very quiet, independent activity. So that might be a little bit calmer if you have a huge class. To address the question on how to adapt this activity for more beginning students, I think with a lot of beginning students, they're not sure what to write on the poster. So I think it's a good idea to provide some sentence starters for them. You can write sentences on the board for them. So for example, you can help them say, one thing I noticed from this quotation or photo is, and then they finish the sentence. Or I feel, and then they finish the sentence. Or I agree with this quotation because, or I disagree with this quotation because. So providing these sentence starters for beginning students, actually not just beginning students, all levels of students, will be very effective to help them to understand how to respond to the posters.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing those thoughts to those question askers in the chat box. We hope that those responses help you apply that activity in your classroom context. So back to our question at the moment, what is one idea from this webinar that you would like to remember or use in your classes, and why? We've got lots of responses. People are taking a lot of things away from this webinar. Asma is saying think, pair, share is a great activity. Francis is saying open-ended questions. Arlith is saying, I would like to use the 4 corners activity because it promotes communication skills. Excellent. Irene is saying, I would like to remember the gallery walk because it makes students not to be bored in the classroom. They can collaborate and communicate. And I saw someone else comment that it might be a good option for more talkative students to give them a direction to channel that energy. Great. Alita is also saying they'd like to try the gallery walk because it is very creative and it can be applied to several activities for critical thinking, and at the same time develops the 4 language skills on a communicative basis. Wonderful. Lourdes is saying implementing the 4 corners activity to push their students to debate and support their arguments. Wonderful. Daniela is saying all 3 main examples of activities were great. I will try them all. We wish you the best of luck, Daniela, in applying all of those. And Gabby is saying the gallery walk seems like a great activity to let students share their thoughts. Wonderful responses, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for your thoughtful responses, everyone. And I'm really happy that you'll be able to use some of these ideas from today's session. To finish off, I'd like to thank all of you for your enthusiastic participation. I want to leave you with this final quotation from Albert Einstein, which says, "Education is not the learning of facts, but training the mind to think." I hope all of you can take at least one thing from this webinar to help train your students' minds and to empower them, which is the true meaning of education.
Thank you so much, Serena, for joining us today and for sharing the benefits of teaching critical thinking and demonstrating wonderful ways to encourage students of all ages to think deeply and critically. We'd also like to thank all of you in the audience for your engagement and participation today.